I'm Alexander Parsons. I'm a media composer, so I compose for all sorts of different types of media, from theatre through to television, so quite a lot of television documentaries, and also beginning work on some films as well. The music for Stunted Trees and Broken Bridges was, well, immediately the first thing I saw when I read the script was what sort of style was it going to be? Was it going to be something that was very traditionally instrumental? Was it going to be full orchestral? Was it going to be a mix of different sounds? I think that was the first thing I thought. Well, actually, because of the nature of Stunted Trees and Broken Bridges, I think it was really just the futuristic side of it that really grabbed me. It's not set too far in the future, but it's enough that I thought the instruments probably didn't want to be, totally traditional. So I decided to use a few traditional instruments, a few live instruments. I used the cello, a little bit of violin as well. But everything that I did use was quite heavily processed, so it doesn't really sound like a cello, or it doesn't really sound like a choir. I used a choir at some points, but they all had all sorts of different effects on there. And that was my aim, really, just to make it sound slightly unusual and slightly almost unnatural. Well, for me, this was actually my first theatre project, so I think the first challenge for me was how do you write a piece of music for theatre, I think. And it's very different from, because I'm used to working with picture, which is locked, it's just there, and that's all you see. When you're working with live, but you're working with actors, the whole thing changes. Sometimes, some sections may take longer than others, some sections may be much shorter than you expect. So I think what I really did was to create music that was almost endless. It didn't have a some of them had a starting point, but some of them didn't. The idea is that they can fade them in whenever they like. Lengths of tracks would be, for actually the entry music, the length of that track was 40 minutes long. Just to make sure that everyone was in the space in the hall before they started to play. So I think the timings were the things that were really the biggest challenge for me. I think there was one element which was quite surprising, both for me and could well be for the audience as well. And it's where Miles is in his own lab with Hayley, and he presses play on the stereo, and out pops this rather unusual sound. I think Miles is quite an unusual character, obviously. There's something not quite right, and I was thinking, well, what sort of music would he listen to? I mean, he's trying to seduce Hayley, so how would he do that? So my idea was that he would press play on a little stereo, or you might even hear it through the big speakers. As yet, I don't know what the outcome will be. But what I did was I imitated Barry White, so I imagined that he would listen to something really unusual, not something like dubstep or anything like that. He'd be listening to Barry White. So this kind of 1970s, very sexy music. So I imitated Barry White's very deep voice, and I pitch shifted it down so it actually sounds like Barry White. So I think that might take people by surprise. When I was writing the music, I did actually have some thoughts about the characters themselves. Are the characters going to have their own particular theme? Is there going to be a certain melody when a certain character walks on? I actually thought not. But what I did decide to do is give both Miles and Emerson exactly the same theme. So between scenes, you'll hear a very short snippet of music. We call it a cue. And they're exactly the same, but played on different instruments. So Emerson, he'll have a piano and a glockenspiel, whereas Miles will have exactly the same melody using a piano and a guitar. So they sound very similar, but they're slightly different. But of course, I wanted that to be the case, because actually, in my opinion, I think actually it's established that Miles and Emerson do have quite a lot in common. So I wanted to make that through the themes as well.